All right, welcome in. We have the top takeaways from Cowboys OTAs, Week 2 media availability, all the compelling video, all the news and headlines for your Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboy injured player who is ahead of schedule. Wait for that. I'm Gavin Dawson from 105.3 The Fan, home of the Cowboys in DFW, along with former Kentucky All-Academic guard, Newbear, and a good evening to you, sir. How the heck are you?
Awesome. I appreciate it. I love it when you make me sound smart.
Right on. Well, you are super smart. Love talking football. Thing I saw or heard at media availability today, I have a nice little collection here, actually. Schotty describing a play from practice this week, Newbear. Check it out.
How hard he's working, but there was a play, and it really wasn't anything George did. But we're in the red zone, and we're in kind of a spread formation. We hit him for a touchdown. Joe did on a little a bender, like a little skinny post down in the low red zone, and CeeDee was on the other side. And when CeeDee broke out and he looked back to see where the ball went and he saw George in the end zone, he kind of dragged his toes up. CeeDee was like, yes. So I think his excitement for knowing that we've added some pieces, which will add to the competition, it was cool to see.
It was very cool to see. Well, I didn't get to see it. Nobody did. That portion of practice not available to media earlier this week, Newbear. But I just think it's confirmation this is going to be a go. I mean, the only thing other than them trying to pass too much this year that could slow this thing down would be weird chemistry. And it's just a 10-10 start. Like, this is going to be a buddy cop with Lamb and Pickens, I feel like.
Well, wasn't GP coming over and doing push-ups? CeeDee dropped the ball and CeeDee dropped down to do his push-ups, and GP runs right over. That's the thing that Pickens didn't have in Pittsburgh. He didn't have the old head to show him the way. If George Pickens would have arrived in Pittsburgh with Hines Ward in that locker room, it's a different career arc for him. And CeeDee Lamb is that kind of guy, and he's also the same kind of talent, right? Pickens didn't have to respect a Deontay Johnson, a Roman Wilson coming out of the third round, a Van Jefferson trying to hang on to his career here in Pittsburgh. CeeDee Lamb is him. Pickens looks across the field, and it's like looking in a mirror.
Man, it's amazing to have two guys like that. I can't imagine, Lamb has to understand now defenses are going to have to worry about him. This is going to make me more open. We're going to get into this. I think I want to plan like a long-form deep dive into how much the Cowboys should pass versus run. But I think my only concern here is that the Cowboys will get too enamored with the idea of throwing it downfield and not be able to develop the kind of running game that I think predicts winners. And that's no knock on Dak. I just think more so in this NFL than maybe 5 years ago, you have to be able to take advantage of these, running opportunities that I think they are going to get tons of with these two guys out in routes.
Everyone wants to talk about exotic defenses, and don't get me wrong, Sunday is as complicated as it gets. But with the prevalence of the Tampa 2, I mean, they're daring you to basically force you to do exactly what you're talking about, to just line up and play a little bit of slobber knocker football. And what's really going to be fascinating is the running back room, right? We've talked about that week to week. Javonte is starting to get exciting, right? And I got the article out this week, and we've talked a lot about Blue and realizing that he actually isn't a 4.38 guy. He's maybe a 4.25 guy. And
let me jump into that real quick, Newbear. I heard something today. The feeling inside the building is that they're high on Miles Sanders. They feel like the Carolina was just a wash, and you basically got a guy that's picking up where he left off in Philadelphia with very little tread off the tires from his experience with the Panthers.
Well, he was a 5.5 yard a carry guy in Philly. I mean, everyone saw what happened with Saquon Barkley in Philly 3 years in a row. Their PFF #1 offensive line. However, even after 2 dystopian years in Carolina, the dude's still 4.7, right? And you talk about him coming back healthy. Talk about him stepping into a situation where you have the ability to slash, to catch balls out of the backfield, take advantage of the things you can do. And, oh, by the way, Pickens and Lamb are taking everyone away from you. There's going to be a lot of green grass for either him or Blue. And we were joking a couple weeks ago about the post 6'1" cuts, and maybe Sanders is the guy on that list. Javonte Williams is playing the enter camp at RB1, but it's going to be a competition every day.
Yeah, and then Hunter Lipke, and who knows, maybe Deuce Vaughn could put together something. I know there'd be a lot of fans that would love to see that. So that's one of the big storylines is, CeeDee and Pickens. The love fest continues, but I have a love fest for players getting healthy. We're going to go to DeMarvin and Overshone.
Yeah.
Said something very interesting today. ESPN's Todd Archer was asking Demo about this ACL tear, which he was also recovering from last year. And here he gives you some context and then where he is on the timeline. Whoop. He's going to give you some context and where he is on the timeline.
Tore a couple more ligaments, but basically same rehab. I had to ease my way into it with the PCL and the MCL, but other than that, it's just the same process, same end goal. Look, mental notes. I like every spot I didn't hit in my rehab. Like I remember exactly where I was at last year in that process. So kind of measure it off that. Go back and look at videos, and like I say, I'm gonna be good when I come back. I'm gonna be real good.
You got the same spot now that you were X amount of months after that first.
I definitely say I'm ahead of that. So I'm feeling better. It's just like I said, it's a mental thing. Like once you get over that mental block, that dang, I just tore every.
So Todd Archer pressed him for an answer ahead of the schedule last year, Newbear. That's amazing. I mean, he's probably good at it now, but he blew out all 3 of the knee ligaments this time around as compared to the ACL. So that was a very pleasant surprise. He was asked when he's going to come back. He left that to the trainer, but when somebody asked maybe Thanksgiving, he said, "Oh, that's a lock," and that he might start the year on PUP.
It's a real thing, the mental side of it. I'm just a humble lineman. Either side of the ball. The joke is, you can play injured, right, as a lineman because you're playing in a phone booth. And when you're going through coming back from something like this, when I experienced it the first time and you're doing a drill, particularly anything where you got to do the conditioning stuff and you're really starting to push yourself to get back in shape to get out there and play football. And you get into whether it's a winter or summer conditioning, it starts getting a little competitive and you get cleared and the doctors say you're good. And then all of a sudden they throw down, the cones or a hula hoop and you got to cut and you got to plant, you got to pivot, you got to turn. And it feels like your bones touch inside because there's something that wasn't there. There's something that's not there that was there before, whether, the knee scope, not before you even get to the ACL, LCL, MCL, PCL stuff, right? You have this thing that your body does when it starts to rain and you're like 22 years old saying things that you heard your grandpa and your father say. And you're what the hell's going on here? And like the barometric pressure in your body has changed. So for him to be sitting there and first and foremost, I should have led with this. My next thing is going to be a chess piece, not a joke at all. If I might watch that clip just to get some ideas.
He's pretty impressive, dude.
My
and
goodness.
it's incredible what he's brought to the table. It's just so unfortunate he has not been able to stay healthy. It reminds me a lot of Sean Lee 15 years ago where, different kinds of players, but exciting, Johnny on the spot type of linebackers. And if he can get healthy, like last year, he actually played week 1 against Cleveland. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do that this year, but he said throughout the video, it's like a 10-minute video. You can see it at DallasCowboys.com, all these you can. But he said he feels like he can do everything right now. He's that level of confident, and he's ready to go. But he's just going to trust the training staff. Okay. Awesome. Schotty said arrow pointing up on Tyler Guyton. I think this is huge. I have heard that the Clayton Adams, Connor Riley combination of coaching should be very good for him. It's just a better fit than what Mike Solari, the offensive line coach, and Mike McCarthy and the offensive staff was teaching last year, right? So that's a good. But Tyler Guyton had a bad rookie year. If you're getting benched for Udoka, that's not good. But that happened. So that can happen. But what you would not want to tolerate beyond that, Newbear, is the reports that we heard he just doesn't know how to be a pro. It's one thing if you're not ready as a traits player who is a late first round pick. It's going to take some time. But if you don't know how to work and you don't know how to get in shape, that's the bigger issue. That's why I loved what he said today up at the Star.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I figured out a lot about what I need to do to take care of my body to be able to play at a high level, and also just following the guys that have played before me, understanding that their routine is very important. feel like I learned a lot.
So Schotty said the same thing. He said it actually reminds him of Jalen Tolbert. You know, Schotty's been in this building since 2021 as a consultant and stuff. And he said Tolbert came in, right, a guy with a lot of great traits, couldn't really play well until this last year where he had 49 catches, but it had a little bit of a longer learning curve. I don't know how patient I can be here. You have George Pickens for 1 year. There's a lot of things lined up that I think are dependent on what he can do as far as questions you ask of the defense. So would you be confident, Newbear, here in 2025, Tyler Guyton can be your starting left tackle on a strong team?
Well, you just talked about the long learning curve, and guys get that when they're long. When you're 6'8", you wake out of bed 6'8", or you don't, just like Jaden Blue running sub 4.3, right? Those are things that you either have or you don't, and he does. And so he's going to get every opportunity to prove. And let's not forget, this is a guy who classed up as a college player. TCU to Oklahoma is a jump. I don't care what anybody says. The conferences are different. And when you look at, you know, the offensive system that he played in Oklahoma, like a lot of these guys have one-word play calls. A lot of these guys are out there, you know, playing against somebody that has no chance to play on Sunday, on Saturday. And now every game, not just week in and week out on Sunday, but play in and play out at practice, this dude's confidence is getting wrecked a little bit because he's playing against dudes who are dudes, right?
He only played the 1 year at right tackle at Oklahoma, right tackle. Right. He was a tight end when he got to TCU. I mean, there's a lot to get figured out that I want to be patient with. I definitely don't want to throw Guyton away. I just don't know that he should be the guy this year.
This is the thing that's really interesting about this. So you talk about, you know, Lane Johnson's another guy who ate himself into, right, the career that he's in now. Guyton might have had a little bit too much at the buffet, right? There's guys, just because you're 6'8" doesn't mean you need to get up to 340 and do it, you know, with rapidity. And what we've heard this offseason is 25 plus pounds have come off. What I loved about that clip is I couldn't tell at first if that was like a new camo look or if the dude just got out of the sauna, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he looks like he's worked his tail off because he just looks different. And when you're 6'8" and you start talking about 25, 30 pounds coming off, that's how you go from being a waist bender. Sorry, I just completely lost my mind. Going from being a waist bender to a knee bender, which is already hard when you're that long, right? I mean, my 9-year-old daughter's 5'4" because my wife's 6'2", and she's joking about how our baby, our 18-month-old, doesn't have to bend down to pick stuff up off the ground. And just watching the two of their body types are completely different than mine, right? Guyton's body type is not only different than other people's who, you know, play in the position that he does. There's not a whole lot of 6'8" guys out there, but he was a tight end who ate himself into an offensive lineman. So his body almost is reverse adjusting to that on the fly.
Man, that's really interesting, and I love it, especially because, you know, last year he had some good reps. His problems were penalties and getting overextended. Yeah. So if being a better athlete can fix that second part, I'm sure time will fix the penalties, and he's definitely a good enough athlete to really help.
The number one thing Jimmy Johnson said, right, the saying is fear makes, but he changed it to fatigue, right, makes cowards of us all. And if you're already doubting yourself because you're not quite at that skill level, and you're tired because you're out of shape, that's 10, 12, 15 percentage points off of you not even being close to being as good as the dude across from you week in and week out. So if you're in shape and now you're talking about being able to slow things down because the game is a little bit different, right, as you understand it, but as you also understand the way that you have to play within it. The dudes that I had the most problems with were long guys. I could throw up, you know, high 30s. I actually got stronger after college because I was healthy, right? But when you start talking about dudes, you go, man, that dude only benched 225 15 times. But the leverage that's created by that. Well, when you're playing across a dude from Aaron Donald, who's the same size as me, but he's got 35-inch arms or whatever the measurables are, and now you add that to a dude who's across from you coming off the edge, who's running like Myles Garrett, like look out. Like not look out for the player, look out for Dak Prescott because you're about to get put on your back.
Yeah. No, that's great stuff, and reason to be optimistic. If Tyler Guyton hits, I know Cooper Beebe's going to be better in year 2. I have heard Tyler Booker is looking plug and play so far. I know it's just OTAs, but he, you know, you can spot it when these guys like Travis Frederick, Zach Martin come through. It's like, well, there's an interior guy who's going to be on the all-rookie team, you know, and we're getting those same kind of vibes. So you hope that this offensive line can not only protect Dak but open up the run game. Here we go. Up next from OTAs, Joe Milton, new quarterback backup, met with the media. I have a thought on why he's here for you, but here he is on why he wanted to be a Cowboy.
Blessed to be here. What was it about?
Oh, man, back in the heat, for one. They allowed me to play in the dome. For two, for three, it's America's team. And then also it's just great to learn from somebody like that.
Okay, so, it's a good fit for him. I think he's here because he has upside, and the Cowboys are hoping that there's a shot that if Dak does get hurt again like Romo did in 2016, they could have a guy with upside. Cooper Rush, I know, can maybe play 500 football. If the schedule's not too tough, even way better than 500 football 3 years ago, beat the Bengals. Coming off a Super Bowl, he beat the Bengals, almost beat them again this year when they were super hot. So I would much rather have Cooper Rush as my backup. I'm trying to look at the positive here, Newbear, that I guess this guy gives you a shot, but nobody knows where his passes are going, Well,
we know they're going to go a hell of a lot farther than Cooper Rush's. I mean,
he's my Hail Mary guy.
There's check down merchants, and then there's 6.27 adjusted yards per attempt. But the thing about Cooper Rush that's misleading is you talk about being a check down merchant, and the dude's barely a 60% passer. And he's also throwing almost an interception per. There's a lot of imperfections and things. There's a reason he's a backup quarterback, but he's going to hold a clipboard for a long time because he finds ways to win. And we talked a little bit, off air earlier about how, there's stuff that you can't teach here, right? That if you don't have it, here and here, that he has, and those intangible things matter. Joe Milton has every tangible element. And one of the things, and Jaden Blue, this is a part of something that we talked about, I was watching in-season Hard Knocks last year, and I was thinking to myself, watching Chase Brown pop off, just being reminded of how he came from this place where he was expected to share time with Zach Moss, and if we're talking about Javonte Williams or Miles Sanders, and those guys go down, and Blue would have to be the guy, and we're having that conversation. Well, what if the same thing happens with Milton? And one of the things that Blue and Milton both share is that they didn't have a ton of time in college. Even if Milton was in school for 5 and Blue was only in school for 3, Milton only started 1 year at Tennessee. Right, he couldn't get off the bench at Michigan. He didn't.
Schotty brought that up today. That even his college experience, it wasn't a great opportunity to learn because the scheme they were running. Yeah,
exactly. And it's and geez, if Lincoln Riley's scheme is about getting dudes, I mean, Heupel is one of the best dudes at scheming dudes wide, and you would see those films, right? And one of the things that's interesting about Milton though is the reason Tennessee had so much turmoil this offseason is that their quarterback, who everyone thinks is going to be a first rounder next year, who's now at UCLA because of NIL and all that back and forth, which is a whole other conversation for another day. But Milton hit the balls that Nico couldn't. And Heupel would get dudes open, and Milton would put the ball, like couldn't walk out there and hand it to him better. So when you start talking about CeeDee Lamb and particularly George Pickens, 50-50, if we end up in a dire situation where Dak's only there for half the season or just on a week-to-week basis, the thing that's really cool about Milton is the same way you talk about Saquon Barkley. You might get a few of those, oh, hey, I could have got 5 or 7, and instead I got -2, but you for damn sure are going to get some of those 80 home run balls.
Yeah, and it would be fun to get him in there, for that element. And he's probably athletic enough that you could run him more.
4.59,
could be
4.55.
I mean, there could be a path to victory here with Joe Milton, the quarterback. I mean, week 18, it looked good, but those kind of situations, I think it's basically preseason. So my fingers are crossed, but I feel like you're prospecting just like when you took Dak, it came together for Dak. I love how these Cowboys are always trying to find their next franchise quarterback, though in the craziest places, an undrafted guy, a 4th-round guy, baseball players. And they've done a pretty good job of finding them. So, maybe Joe Milton's just going to be the next. The final story I got here for you at OTAs, buddy, is that Micah Parsons not in attendance again. Shotty told a funny story. Apparently he saw him at the airport on his way in to town, and Micah was going to go do some traveling. The great news, I think, is it's easier for other leaders to emerge. Like, you got some new guys, Solomon Thomas, Kenneth Murray Jr., that are showing tremendous leadership traits. And if Micah is there being the best player and doing his thing, it's going to be hard to speak up and go over the top of somebody in that situation. But, you know, that topic's kind of tired. I guess I'm just happy that he has already proven he can do more than enough to be ready. You know, not all guys can do that. Zeke was not ready when he held out in what was that, 2019? He showed up not ready. Micah Parsons is going to be ready, Newbear.
Hey, speaking of being ready, not to just completely turn it back to Joe Milton, but let's not forget one thing. As we're talking about Micah Parsons not being there, Joe Milton cost the Patriots the #1 pick. You talk about Week 18 games being meaningless. If that dude would have just been a dog and laid down, but Joe Milton was like, I'm out here to win. I don't care about next year's. Maybe you didn't. Maybe that was his way out of town. But all kidding aside, coming back to this Micah Parsons thing, it's hard for me not to think about what's going on here in Pittsburgh with TJ Watt because of the contract, the holdout, and how some of this stuff plays out. And when JJ Watt went all over, he did his car wash today talking about how teams that don't extend their own players early, exactly what you said, cost themselves $6, $8, $10 million a year when the player is willing to take less to stay home. The player is willing to – it's a business, and they don't like it. The team doesn't like it when the players treat it like a business, even though the team always says it's a business when they're trying to squeeze every dollar. At this point, is it a big deal? No. But what you're talking about is trying to find something to make it good, right? That's the fine line with this thing. It's not a big deal to problem, right? We're going to run out of ways to spin this thing because eventually, if he's going to be the leader of this team, like DeMarcus Ware and these legends want to see him becoming our saying and thinking that he can be, and he's telling them that that's what he wants to be, then at a certain point, you can't be making jokes and trending because you're seeing your coach at the airport getting ready to go to Cancun, or you're going to be in Cancun after Week 18.
Yeah, maybe hanging out with Stephon Diggs. Live it up. All righty. Man, I'm having so much fun talking football with you. Thank you so much for this project. You can read our stuff at howboutwow.com. Look for shorts. We do long form for sure every Sunday, but then as big news days happen throughout the week, we drop in long form for you there as well. So have a good night, brother. Talk to you Sunday.